Hey everybody, it's Mike from the Mike Wagner Show, powered by SonicWeb Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. Looking at a professional website without breaking your budget, SonicWeb Studios is the answer. SonicWeb Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs that blow the competition away. Call today, 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960, or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show, get 20% off your first project. Sonic Web Studios, take your image to the next level. Also, time to give official shout out to our official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson-Zia. If you love fast-paced mysteries, you love Missing by Mia Molson-Zia. Available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing is fast-paced and intriguing with an unforgettable twist. Takes place in 4 countries, 2 strangers, 1 target, where truth is an illusion and those you love will be the first to go missing. It's available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing by Mia Molson-Zia has garnered great reviews and even endorsed by Howard celebrities, including Joanna Cassidy, Forbes Riley, and many others. So grab your copy today before it goes missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon. Also, check out the Mike Wagner Show at themikewagnershow.com on over 30 podcast platforms, including Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Also, Anchor FM, iTunes, Google Play, Amazon, Audible, Apple Music, and more. Take the Mike Wagner Show with you on any mobile device. Subscribe to the Mike Wagner Show on the YouTube channel. Follow the Mike Wagner Show on Instagram and Twitter today. And for great gift ideas, go to Amazon.com and check out the Mike Wagner Show podcast. T-shirts, pop sockets, throw pillows, tote bags, makes great gifts 24/7. Amazon.com. Check out the Mike Wagner Show podcast. And for more great gift ideas, go to Amazon.com and check out Mia Molson-Zia, like Missing, Once, Wrinkles, and more. Amazon.com/Mia Molson-Zia. Check out his cool merchandise like T-shirts, pop sockets, hoodies, and phone cases, and more. Amazon.com/Mia Molson-Zia. Check it out today. Also support the Mike Wagner Show on Anchor FM, PayPal, and the MikeWagnerShow.com. Make sure you give generously today. We're here with a terrific gentleman who is an author of a couple of amazing books, and he grew up in Buffalo, New York, and fell in love with reading and writing at an early age. We'll talk about that. He graduated from Hampton University, became a middle school science teacher in Baltimore, and reminded of the gap in contemporary Black literary protagonists. We'll find out more about that. He moved to Los Angeles and back in 2003, completed his doctoral in clinical psychology with the LA County Department of Mental Health. And he's got a new book out there that works to integrate Black history into a family narrative that actually challenges the status quo for readiness in families as well, and also approaches the issue of racism in the U.S. Through the lens of a psychologist. And this book also deconstructs the intergenerational and effects of racism in both the oppressor and the oppressed, revealing how this unsolved problem manifests in the pre-start day phenomena of the Karen trope. We'll talk about that. Live, ladies and gentlemen, from the Plus Studio somewhere in beautiful sunny California with all these palm trees. I wish we were there right now. He's the author of the new book, White on White Crime, Old Lies in Contemporary Times. Ladies and gentlemen, the amazing author, Dr. Donald E. Grant. Dr. Grant, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. What a great introduction. I appreciate that, Mike.
Well, you got a great resume as well, too. You grew up in Buffalo, New York, and you fell in love with reading and writing at an early age. And you graduated from Hampton University, became a middle science school teacher in Baltimore. You moved to Los Angeles in 2003, completed your doctoral in clinical psychology with the LA County Department of Mental Health. And you also have 2 other books, which is called Black Men, Intergenerational Colonialism and Behavioral Health, A Noose Around the Nations, and A Moon for Us All. And you have a new book called White on White Crime, Old Lies in Contemporary Times. And this is through the lens of a psychologist approaching issue of racism in the U.S. And you break it down very nicely as well, too. And before getting to all that, Dr. Grant, tell us how you first got started.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Again, thanks for the introduction. Yeah, I began my work as a middle school science teacher. My bachelor's degree is in biology, and I wanted to go to medical school, and I had an internship at a hospital and realized, nope, I don't want to do that. And there wasn't anything you can do with a bachelor's degree in biology was teach middle school science. And I loved it, but I recognized that the area where I could be most helpful was much larger. And that's when I decided to go to get my graduate degree in clinical psychology. And I became a clinician for LA County Department of Mental Health for years. I oversaw foster care systems for a bit. And I realized that it really wasn't my role, like in that micro area working with clients. I really wanted to help systems solve a lot of the ills that they were creating that would create the problems that you solve on the one-on-one basis. And so when you're meeting with people one-on-one, how do I create organizations and systems and places where people can actually have policies that keep them safe, actually understand how these systems work? And so for me, I've been fortunate enough to have, three careers, not three jobs, many jobs, but three careers as a
Wow.
teacher, as a middle school teacher. That was one significant career. And then as a clinical psychologist, I served and worked with people. And then I was a higher education administrator and executive for a while. I served as a dean at a college, overseeing three schools, one school with three programs in human development. And for me, now that I run my own business full time and I'm a writer full time, it's been amazing to be able to take all those different pieces of spaces that I've been and integrate them. And I find that my clients see a lot of value in that. And I work with major organizations across the country, a lot of Fortune 100 companies, to help them move through discussions and move through innovations, not just in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space, but right now I'm actually training 12 major news stations
Wow.
on trauma informed care, meaning that, you send a journalist out to do a story on the murder of an 8-year-old, and then you expect them to just go back to their desk and edit the story and prepare it. But we're not saying, especially if that's a parent, how they've been traumatized. And so I'm helping news stations understand that right now. So my work is in an array of spaces, but they all really feed into my ability to support wellness in so many different areas.
And you also talked about having some, solving problems, policies, and everything else. You talked about with implementing, like with the news stations and everything else. What are some of the other policies you've implemented? What are some of the big success stories you have encountered? Like, say, implement this, implement that, and the result is just tremendous. Like, what are some of the other success stories you've had?
Some amazing work has been done. And I'll tell you, the success has really come from the willingness of the people who I work with to open themselves up. And some of these executives and leaders who say, I don't know what I don't know, and I need you to help me figure this out. And so, one major thing that I do is I work with organizations and I tell them, I say, hey, here's what you need after doing listening sessions with their client, with their entire employee base, whether it's 700 people or 200 people. And then moving them into a space where they understand the needs and then activating them. One thing I did was I had to read one organization's entire staff handbook and employee handbook to help them understand that the infrastructure that they needed to reach the goals that they wanted, they didn't have. They needed new HR policies and practices. They needed new recruitment policies and practices. They need to open their pipeline to explore new multicultural groups. And so being able to review a handbook for a major organization and say, these are all the barriers that you're creating logistically to get your work done. Another one that I have that I'm really proud of was a script that I read for a client of mine to help them understand some tropes that they were using as it related to African Americans and other Black Americans. And right now in Hollywood, we have this major concern with white writers kind of presenting Black characters in a certain way, valuable to the story, but this kind of white savior complex seems to come out. And so I help people with their books and their adaptations and their scripts to say, hey, this is what you're risking doing, and here's how you remedy it. And so for me, being able to see those things come to life is really amazing, and helping people kind of see those blind spots is just so rewarding.
And do you think these challenges have been much more difficult, today, or were the were greater or easier challenges, like, say, 10, 20, 30 years ago?
I think when you think about, as just in the book, I talk about just very briefly the film that was released in 1915, Birth of a Nation. And you think about the kind of guardrails that were in place when that movie was created, and it was a play and it was a book. There were no concerns with this. So I imagine that it was much easier then, because you didn't have to pay attention to these things that we're asking people to pay attention to now. We didn't have concerns with hurting or injuring certain people, and now we do. And so I think that it is very tough right now for people, and it's not the learning that's tough, It's the unlearning. We've been given so many things that we assume that we can just operate from. And it's kind of like, nope, you can't say that anymore because you're going to hurt someone. And before we didn't care about hurting those people,
You know,
whoever they were.
it actually reminded me of comedies as well too. Back in the '60s and '70s, you had like Blazing Saddles, the movie. You also had like All in the Family, Good Times, and everything else. And I think I'm trying to think of another movie where it's just like it's okay to be yourself. Now it's just like a lot of the movies out there and everything else are pretty much like no, stuff like that. So yeah, oh my gosh, I
Well,
mean,
I think the goal is kind of how do we change some of ourselves? I think about Archie Bunker and All in the Family and Good Times, and I always tell this story. There's this great story that I'd love your viewers to take a look at. Norman Lear, who was the writer for a lot of those shows back in the 50s and 60s, Good Times, Maude, All in the Family, Sanford and Son, all those wonderful shows. He has this YouTube video interview that he's doing where he says the Black Panther Party came to him, and they said, "Hey, why is it that every show you have on television with Black characters, why are they all so poor and they're struggling?" Sanford and Son was a father and son duo in Watts with a junkyard, and Good Times was this Black family living in the projects in Chicago. And the Black Panther Party said, we appreciate those things, but it'd be great if you could show some other images of Black people. So Norman Lear, who was just like saying, "Oh, I'm putting Black people to work, I'm getting all these Black stories on TV. This is awesome. This is great." And that's who he was. But then when he learned that there was another need, he took George Jefferson, who was just a neighbor on All in the Family, and gave him his own show because the Black Panther said Black people also need other representation. And so I do think it's this evolution that we go through, in that sometimes we have to question the information that went into who made us who we are. And I think for men, we're doing that right now because we've been trained to treat women a certain kind of way. And we say, "Oh, I just want to be me." Well, what if being me is injurious to her being her? And those are the things I think we're reckoning with now.
And do you think like the stats is like with the blacks, the African community, the women and everything like that? Do you think it's actually improved over the years, or you think it still needs some work, or is it just like still the same?
It's a steady pace, man. I believe that most women would say that in the workplace today, they don't have the same um, acute issues as they had before, right? Women are no longer necessarily worried about not having an avenue to report a man touching her inappropriately in the workplace. 30 years ago, women just had to suck that up. Like somebody would touch their bottom or touch their shoulder, make them feel super uncomfortable, and there was no avenue of resolution. Now, I'm not denying that it still may happen in the workplace because it does, but now there's an avenue that women can rely upon that says you can't do that and you will be held accountable. That wasn't the case 30 years ago. That wasn't the case 20 years ago. So I do think there are areas where we're improving, and then there's still a lot of work to do. I think about the guys who murdered Ahmed Arbery. They got life in prison. You haven't
Wow.
seen that happen in the American justice system. You haven't seen that happen. Black people have been forced to live with the fact that you can murder us and get away with it, and it's okay. Now there's some new information that says maybe it's not so okay,
hmm And,
or at the very least, you'll be held accountable.
and what about some of the other ones too, like say with the Asians, the Indians, or say like with senior citizens, children, everything like that? What are the issues that they're dealing with right now, or has not been touched yet?
Yeah, there's so many. I think about the neurodiversity community, those who identify as having autism and having different mental health needs. I think right now that's still a community that is not being properly supported or adequately enough supported in so many things. I think that there's still a long way to go with making sure that those individuals who have physical disabilities get access. I watched this great film the other day called CODA. It's an acronym, CODA, and it stands for Children of Deaf Adults. And it was a great film that gave kind of just the lay person a look into that world. If you grew up with deaf families or people who had hearing impairments, it was just a great film. And so I really think that helping helping us expose one another to different lifestyles and different understandings of the world just creates empathy, really creates empathy. So, there's a laundry list of groups who still need support, who still need people to know that, hey, they're still being mistreated and there's still things that are not equitable for them.
And certainly do so as well too. We'll talk about your new book, White on White Crime: Old Lies in Contemporary Times through the lens of a psychologist. And we'll also talk about your other books, A Moon for Us All, Black Men, Intergenerational Colonialism, and more. But first, listen to the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at SonicWebStudios.com for all your needs. Looking at a professional website without breaking your budget? Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs that blow the competition away. Call today, 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960. Or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show. Get 20% off your first project. Sonic Web Studios. Take your image to the next level. Also, time to give official shout out to our official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson-Zia. If you love fast-paced mysteries, you'll love Missing by Mia Molson-Zia. Available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing is fast-paced and intriguing with an unforgettable twist. Takes place in 4 countries, 2 strangers, 1 target, where truth is an illusion and those you love will be the first go missing. It's available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing by Mia Molson-Zia has garnered great reviews and even endorsed by Howard celebrities, including Joanna Cassidy, Forbes Riley, and many others. So grab your copy today for Goes Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon. Also, check out the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com on over 30 podcast platforms. Take us with you on any mobile device. Subscribe to the Mike Wagner Show on the YouTube channel. Follow the Mike Wagner Show on Instagram and Twitter today. For great gift ideas and more, go to Amazon.com and check out the Mike Wagner Show podcast. And for more great gift ideas, go to Amazon.com. Check out Mia Molson-Zia's books like Missing, Once, and Wrinkles. Also great t-shirts, pop sockets, hoodies, and tote bags, and also as well as phone cases and more. Amazon.com/Mia Molson-Zia. Check it out today. Also support the Mike Wagner Show on Anchor FM, PayPal, and the MikeWagnerShow.com. Make sure you do so today. We're here with the amazing author, Dr. Donald Grant, with you grew up in Buffalo, New York, fell in love with reading, also graduated from Hampton University, become a Mills Science School teacher here on the Mike Wagner Show from Baltimore, Maryland. Before we talk about your books, A Moon for Us All, Black Men, Intergenerational Colonialism, and the new one, White on White Crime. And you grew up in Buffalo and you fell in love with reading. And, tell us about that. It's like, I love reading books also, too. It's amazing. It's not the Charlie Brown, by the way.
Yeah, I had an aunt who was a teacher when I was a little kid, and she would just bring me books all the time. And as a kid, I was an only child growing up. I have a brother who's in his 20s now, but I was already an adult and kind of out of the house at that time when he was born. But I just read. I just really enjoyed reading. I didn't grow up with a whole lot of stuff. And so books were an opportunity. The internet didn't exist when I was a kid. And so books were really an opportunity to kind of like move me around the world. And I went to an amazing school from 5th grade through 12th grade called City Honors High School, which was even greater exposure, one of the best schools in all of Western New York, really. And it also exposed me to all different types of reading. So, in 5th and 6th grade, I'm reading Shakespeare and all these different things, which was amazing. And so for me, I really did fall in love with reading early and writing as well.
Wow, that is amazing. And who are some of your favorite authors and writers growing up?
That's a great question. And so August Wilson was probably my first favorite playwright. I really, really fell in love with plays through reading August Wilson. And then that helped August Wilson, a Black playwright, actually helped me better understand Shakespeare and reading that. I love reading Things Fall Apart. Was one of the earliest books that I think kind of took a hold of me, and that was by Chinua Achebe, a West African author who just wrote all these really, really amazing stories. As an adult, though, I find myself drawn more to nonfiction, although I need to read more fiction. I really enjoy Malcolm Gladwell. I love kind of the way that he kind of brings data and creates these narratives around data. And I try to do that with my own writing, is to help people understand data in a different way and understand the stories that data tells us.
And how would you describe your writing style?
Huh. I feel like I write, well, I've heard this. I write the way I speak. And I don't know if that, I need to talk to other authors about that because more often than not, when people are reading my work, they say, I can hear your voice
Wow.
in the way that you write. And so I really feel like having been an educator for so many years, a college professor for so many years, and in higher education, I've built this cadence of writing that really legitimately matches my speech pattern.
That's really interesting too. And we'll talk about your first book of Munoz up for us all. And it's about a student that who is not pleased to learn he's a major has a school assignment to complete over
Yeah.
spring break. And tell us more about that. Now, was that you as a child who was not happy about writing something over spring break?
I felt that would be a fun kind of common thing that so many kids experience, like this project over a break. And so I felt that would be a good connecting point for kids. And so that was actually my second book. And what I did with that one was I really wanted families to have an opportunity to kind of open up dialogue with their families, with their loved ones. I wanted a book where, you know, a kid and a mom and dad could read it together and it kind of prompts these dialogues. Growing up, like the student, like the kid in the story, my family and I, we would drive from Buffalo, New York to North and South Carolina every year. My great grandfather moved his family to Buffalo in the 50s during Jim Crow to escape that and
Mm.
moved up to work in the steel mills in Buffalo, which was a bustling town during the Great Migration. But they wanted to make sure that we knew our family in the South. And so every year during Easter, we pack up into my great grandpa's van and we drive down. And so I wanted to kind of share that narrative because there was so many rich opportunities for stories. So much of what I learned about my family happened on those trips. And so I wanted to be able to have people learn about the experiences of Black Americans, learn about Black history, and then hear some really important discussions that happen amongst Black folk in a way that allowed them and invited them to have those conversations themselves. Like, what did the Capitol raid mean? Or how was that discussion had in some Black families? And I write some dialogue about that so that people can use it to really support their own space. And then, you know, it's littered with a lot of Black history facts, but more so in a conversational sense. So I teach people about the murder of Emmett Till, not through talking about it as a just kind of this matter of fact manner, but you know, the grandpa lived down the street from Emmett Till's aunt and uncle when he was kidnapped and lynched, and so you're getting it from that perspective. And so I was really excited to be able to create that story for those purposes.
And also too, I noticed that as well too. That also share stories about where they lived and everything from Europe to pre-colonial Ghana, Brazil, plantations in Mississippi and everything, and just a little bit about that, and of course the way they live, like in certain parts of the world, even like say Detroit or say in Birmingham, or you go out to Paris. Had a, a a section over there, or even go out to say like with I'm trying to think. There's like another one. Well, there's all over. So you can just pick a few. So
Yeah, yeah, all over the world, and that's another thing that I want to do, and that's what was related in my first book was talking about how so many of these things are global issues. They're not just domestic, and you know, one of my big concerns with, particularly right now, where you know, when we're talking about February and Black History Month, it's really important that people understand that Black history began well before 1619 when the first enslaved Africans were brought here. There's a long history of greatness to the Black culture that more often than not gets minimized. White children grow up, you know, in their social studies classes, learning about all these amazing people who existed and hailed from Europe prior to them even coming to the US. But Black people only get their story starting in the US. And so the reason why I added those stories to that book was so that people know that there's a long history of greatness and achievements and so many wonderful things that happened prior to our enslavement. I think it means something when you tell a group of people that their origins start in chains.
hmm and also too, especially your other book, Black Men, Intergenerational Colonialism and Behavioral Health: A News Across the Nations, and details about 4 euro Unity of
Nations.
nations. Yes. Oh, that's a
Yeah.
hard word that's a hard word to
Euronormative.
spit out.
Yeah, it's a hard one to get out. And what I wanted to do with that was to say that, we look at the dangers that we say Black men experience in the United States. And I've traveled the world. I've been on every continent except Antarctica. And I always say that in every nation that is kind of dominated by whiteness, Black men are experiencing this. And I wanted to create the data to support it. And so Black men, intergenerational colonialism and behavioral health, a noose across nations. That was my first book published by Palgrave Macmillan, a textbook publisher, which I did an in-depth research study showing how we see outcomes very similarly in the US, Canada, France, and the UK for Black men. And these are Black men whose like grandparents were Frenchmen. I'm not talking about, because you add a whole new layer of discussion when you talk about immigration, but these are Black folk who grew up in these places. And we still see in France a disproportionate number of Black men being arrested. The reason why we don't see the same Black men dying from police shootings in those countries, because police don't carry guns at the same rate that they do here in the United States of America. But you still see disproportionate arrests, you still see disproportionate detainment, but you also still see disproportionate high blood pressure, disproportionate school dropout rates. Black men are overly incarcerated in all these nations. And so I wanted people to understand that the narrative is much bigger than just the United States, even though this is where the bulk of the slave plantations were, considering those four nations that I'm describing. Just because there were no big plantations in London, we know that that entire economy was grounded in the free slave labor that was being created in the cotton plantation industry. And so I just wanted people to have a perspective that said it's bigger than we think. And that means we need to dedicate resources to it that are bigger than we think we need to.
And of all the four nations you talked about, the US, the UK, France, and Canada, which one is considered the most oppressed and which one is like, say, making some progress to the issues?
It's a great question. So I'll give a different answer for each because it's a little bit more nuanced than that. So what I'll say about France is that France right now doesn't allow you to collect data based on race unless you're a nonprofit who's been given a special government license to do it. And so the problem in France is that all their social programming is primarily based on socioeconomic status and immigration status. So the Black French people, the Afro French people, are experiencing this space where they're saying, hey, we need resources that are different, but because you're not counting us, we don't see it. We can't get what we need. And so I do think that even though many Afro-French people are experiencing some really great opportunities, so on and so forth, I think they're going to be caught behind because the government is not acknowledging the fact that these different groups need different things. As it relates to Afro-Canadians, I think Afro-Canadians, because of their socialized medical system and the acknowledgement of the different things that they may need, I think that they are on their way to some really great spaces. But the problem is that there's still so many concerns with the levels of segregation in Canada, where you got so many people who may grow up and never see a Black person. Even though that's the case here in the US, it's far more exacerbated because of the smaller population of Black folk in Canada. But when you go to Toronto, you don't see that problem. Vancouver, you don't see that problem. And so finally, when we look at Canada, US, France,
The
um,
UK.
the UK, those individuals in the UK have really created a unique Afro-British culture. There's more research. Probably Afro-British culture has the second amount of in-depth research about those individuals there behind the United States of America. And so I think that those people who identify as Afro-British are probably on their way to some of the kind of most important spaces of equity and inclusion that we see. But then you look at the government and there is no representation in the ways that we have in the United States. And so I feel like in the US, we have more of our voices included in the political development than they do in any of those other nations. But I think some of those other nations have some more opportunities than we have. So I think it's a mixed bag across the board. And if we were able to pull out the best conditions from each of those nations and make sure everybody had them, that would be the winner. But since that's not possible, we'll keep doing what we're doing.
And what else can we know about the book, Black Men, Intergenerational Colonialism and Behavioral Health? What else?
It's just a wonderful collection of data that really helps to illustrate the importance of these points. It goes across hundreds of thousands of years to talk about evolution and talk about language development. And I just really want people to see it as a cohesive body of knowledge to really advance a really in-depth understanding of what we're seeing today and an international context. I can't minimize the importance of that international context, because we think that only Black families in America are being oppressed. But when I'm walking around Paris, Black guys are talking to me about the same thing that we're talking about here.
Wow.
When I'm in the UK, talking about the same thing. I was just in the UK a few years ago doing a presentation in Brighton, which is this small little cool beach town in the UK. And these Black guys were just talking about literally the same conversation that me and my buddies have here. And I speak a little French. And so when I'm there, I'm having this conversation. And so I think a lot of people would be surprised to understand that this is happening internationally.
That is rather surprising. And where can we find your first two books at?
Amazon, you can get both of them. They're both available pretty much wherever you buy books. You can actually get the first book as a free reader from the publisher. And so for Black Men, Intergenerational Colonialism and Behavioral Health, if you go to Palgrave Macmillan, you can get it. And if you type in A Noose Across Nations, it's the shorter subtitle, it'll come right up. But A Moon for Us All, they're both available on Amazon or wherever people buy books, you can find them.
We certainly will do so. We'll talk about your new book, White on White Crime, Old Lies in Contemporary Times, in just 1 minute with Dr. Donnelly Grant. You listen to the Mike Widener Show at the MikeWidenerShow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at SonicWebStudios.com for all your needs. Also brought to you by our official sponsor of the Mike Widener Show, international war-wearing author Mia Molson's of Missing, available on Amazon and paperback and ebook. We'll be back with amazing author Dr. Donnelly E. Grant of White on White Crime, Old Lies in Contemporary Times after this time out. We're back with author Dr. Donald E. Grant here on the Mike Widener Show. Let's talk about your new book, White on White Crime, Old Lies in Contemporary Times. And you approach the issue of racism in the U.S. through a lens of a psychologist. Tell us more about the book, White on White, and what inspired you to write it?
I'm really proud of this one. And I tell you, I'm always inspired by gaps in knowledge. My goal is to figure out, how do we see where information is not, and how do we get that information and help other people see it. And so for me, I've been conceptualizing this book for years, to be honest with you. We always talk about the trauma associated with being in the role of the oppressed. We talk about how indigenous people had to experience massacres during colonization and how that plays out today in our disproportionate numbers of indigenous people experiencing substance abuse and suicide and all those things. When I saw the events of January 6th of last year with the Capitol raid,
Oh my
that
gosh.
told me I had to get this book finished. I had to get it out there. And for me, it said that there's this area of information and knowledge that we're just not paying attention to. And that is the transmission of trauma across generations for white people, because we typically talk through mental health lens as though white is human, as though white is normal. And then anything else, we're like, oh, well, this is that, this is that. And so what I want to do is move away from that kind of foundational superiority ideology that says white is human, and begin to talk about white as a cultural group that has experiences that impact their human development, that impact their worldview. But if we keep just referring to white folk as kind of human, we lose that opportunity. And so what I began to do was I began to dig into the narratives and kind of do this juxtaposition of, how do we explain the trauma of Black folk that have lived from enslavement all the way forward? How do we explain the trauma of the Latinx and Hispanic communities who have experienced all these things that still exist in them today, with immigration, trauma, variety of things? And so I looked at the scientific mechanisms used to describe those. And then I began to think about that lynching picture. Picture it for a minute, Mike. When you look up, if you were to Google a photograph of a lynching scene from the 1970s, 1960s, you see these little kids running around. You see all these little white children running around the lynching scene. Now, we know that that little girl wasn't just walking her dog and she happened upon this lynching scene. We know her dad grabbed her by the hand and said, "Hey, come on. We're going to go chase a black dude down. We're going to hang him from a tree and set him on fire, and you're going to watch."
Oh my gosh. That's what happened with that jogger in Atlanta being attacked by three guys. It made me think of it. It's like, hey, here's somebody, let's attack. And he's just jogging through, just minding his own business. I mean, that just brought a flashback. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah. And think about this from like the perspective of a 9-year-old. And so when you look at that, nobody's talking about the trauma that that little girl went home with. Nobody's talking about it because it was just what you did to perpetuate white supremacy. In order to make sure your daughters understood that she was better than black folk, you made her watch you murder black people. Excuse me. But we don't talk about that. We don't talk about the fact that that little girl, she's now the age of a college student's grandmother.
Wow.
She's not 105, she's 82. And
Hmm.
so when we talk about racism, the reason I created this book was to move through the understanding of the fact that white families are still traumatizing their children to maintain this lie of their superiority, to maintain this lie that says that they are better than everybody else. What we want to do is help people understand that what we saw on January 6, 2021, at that raid on the Capitol, we saw a bunch of white people mad because the lies that they've been told throughout their entire lives are now coming back and saying, well, actually, you're the same as everybody else, not worse, but not better. And you've
Hmm.
been told that you've been better. And so now the anger is overwhelming and we're acting surprised that it's overwhelming. Well, if generations of white men have been told for hundreds of years that they have the right to own black people, they have the right to tell them what to do, to kill them, why are we surprised now that when we're telling them you can't do that anymore, why are we surprised that that results in this huge reaction? And so, what I want to do through this book is help people understand the magnitude of what we're trying to unlearn, unpack, and remediate so that we can help people stop doing this. The title of the book is obviously aimed at being a little bit hyperbolic, using kind of the trope that people use for black on black crime. But I think one of the biggest crimes of our century are white people continuously lying to their children about their superiority. Because here's the problem. Again, not to do the Ahmaud Arbery example again, but just think about that man went and got his son. I mean, I have a son, and I wouldn't dare put him in harm's way. He
Hmm.
went and got his son to help him with that lynching because subconsciously he had been secure in knowing that they would face no consequences, that
Hmm.
they were doing what white men have been doing for years, and that they would face no consequences. If he knew that his son would be in danger of spending the rest of his life in jail for this, he wouldn't have brought him along. He would not have brought him to accompany him. And so what we have to do is help people understand there are now consequences for this stuff. And you
Hmm.
can't keep teaching your children because you're putting them in danger.
Right. I mean, you hit the nail right on the head, right, too, Dr. Grant. And what else can the readers get from your book?
Well, this thing about I have this chapter that I call Karen's Revenge. And today we have this kind of
Like the Karen
male,
persona, short
like the
blonde
Karen
hair and all that.
persona.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so we see this behavior. And I also think that I write that chapter specifically because we've really minimized the roles that white women have played in the perpetuation of oppression across the globe. And there's this wonderful book, I can't think of the author's name, but it's called They Were Her Property, where she details all the evidence that speaks to white women slave owners that we don't talk enough about. And so in this chapter, I really want people to understand that when we're talking about racism and dismantling it, even though we don't see white women as complicit as they are, we have to start seeing it. White women oftentimes use their power subconsciously to really create. dangerous spaces for Black folk. I think about the young girl at Central Park with the bird watcher, and all he did was ask her to put her dog on a leash in an area of the park where dogs are supposed to be on a leash. She called the police on him, saying her life was in danger.
Oh my gosh. Just because she did not comply regarding a dog?
And that's what we see. That's what the evidence is showing me through this historic reflection, is that one of the major roles that white women have played in this is their ability, their knowledge of how they have protections in the world. And the fact that this is happening in this way, that this woman would say, and literally the man just said, I need you to put your dog on a leash. You're scaring away all the birds, whatever. And she literally, you see her make a decision on saying, I'm going to call the police and I'm going to tell them you're threatening me, because she knew she had the power to do so. Unfortunately for her, that power doesn't exist anymore in the same way that it did. So the police came. The police came, but she lost her job. She got in trouble.
Oh my gosh.
50 years ago, that wouldn't have happened.
Hmm. And do you think they might have abused their power at that point?
1,000%. That woman, she knew her life. It's on video, so her life was clearly not in danger. But she does know that when she calls the police on a Black man, there is a chance that his life will be in danger.
Oh my gosh. I mean, that's got to be addressed next time as well, too, and researched. And where can we find your book on White on Right, Crime, Old Lies, and Contemporary Times at?
I tell you, Mike, you are lucky to be right on the cusp of this. So it's going to be released in 2 weeks from now. And so
Wow.
it's going to be on Amazon. I got a little bit behind on it. My anticipation was to have it out by now, but it's going to be released for pre-sale very soon. And it's going to be available for purchase anywhere you buy books.
We're certainly looking forward to it. Just make sure Karen doesn't get a hold of it or abuse it. I'm kidding.
She'll call the police on my book for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And then just don't sell it to her. We're here with Dr. Donnelly Grant here on the Mike Wagner Show with White on White Crime, Old Lies, and Contemporary Times. Dr. Grant, it's been great having you on. And just a few more things. What else can we expect from you in 2022 and beyond?
Well, I'm looking at making this book into a documentary. I know everybody doesn't pick up a book like this and reads it. And so I really want to share this message broadly because it creates safety for so many people. And so making films and making documentaries, creating content is where I really want to go with this, just to, make sure that all learners get access. As a teacher, I had to make sure that I was able to teach to my visual learners, teach to the learners who needed to touch things. And so for me, the work of this is so important. I want to make sure everybody can access it.
And I'm sure they will too, thanks to the world of the internet, social media, and everything else. And who do you consider biggest influence in your career?
It's a great question. I think early on, Dr. Cornell West was a big influence on me. He and Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr. have been really influential, kind of external people who I don't know them, but I've watched how they moved academically, and they really served a really, really important role for me. But then I think about many of the men and women just in my families. I have one of the highest degrees in my entire family, and I was fortunate enough to been around really hardworking people all my life, from my dad to my mom to my grandparents. And I think that they really poured a lot into me about the hard work. And so I think they had a huge influence on how I move, who I become, and kind of how I choose what I do in my career.
That is so amazing. Just fantastic. And what's the best advice you can give to anybody at this point?
Huh. Take responsibility. We all have a role to make this world a certain way. Let's all hold our part of that and take responsibility and do something to fix the stuff that's messed up.
And that is so well said. We will do so. Once again, author Dr. Donnelly Grant here on the Mike Wagner Show with White on White Crime, Old Lies, and Contemporary Times. Dr. Grant, a very big thank you for your time. You've been absolutely amazing. Learned a lot from you. Looking forward to having you again soon. Make sure you keep us up to date. Keep in touch. We'd love to have you back. Once again, tell us about your upcoming projects. What's your website? How do people contact you? Where can people purchase or check out your books?
Thank you so much, Mike. It's been such a great time, such a pleasure talking with you and your great questions. You can follow me on social media at Dr. Grant Jr. On Instagram. You can find my books on Amazon, wherever you shop or wherever else you shop for books. And you can go to my website, mindfultrainingsolutions.com. It's my boutique training and consulting firm where you can reach out to me, connect with me, ask questions, or find out if I can be supportive of some of your business needs.
We will certainly do so. Very supportive. Once again, Dr. Grant, a very big thank you for your time. You've been absolutely fantastic. Looking forward to having you again soon. Make sure you keep us up to date, keep in touch. We'd love to have you back, and we wish you all the very best. You've got a great future ahead of you.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. I'll be looking forward to hearing more of your podcast.